The measuring stick just changed around here, buddy. You're looking at it.
You are now listening to the Outsiders Podcast, the most exciting and hard-hitting show on the net. And now, bringing it hard as always on the Kansas City Chiefs and the NFL, here are your hosts, Clint Schweitzer and Noah Groniger.
And welcome to the Outsiders Podcast. Clint Schweitzer, Noah Groniger coming at you with a very special guest because today we have Tony Mandarich, who will be on this very show in a matter of moments.
We've got Steroids, the number 2 overall pick in the draft, pain pills, alcoholism, busting out of the Green Bay Packers, going to rehab, making a great comeback to the Indianapolis Colts, being a starter for 2 years, playing with Peyton Manning, Marshall Faulk. Tony Mandarich has it all.
Oh yeah, you forgot Guns N' Roses too.
How could I forget? The song's playing. He loves it. He's got a dog named Axel. He's got a tattoo on his arm. It's all there.
It's all going to be there, and we're going to talk about everything from steroids to being the biggest, possibly one of the biggest draft busts in NFL history, and we'll see if he still embraces that term. But here we got Tony on the line. And we are very fortunate right now to have a true legend of the NFL, a true legend of sports, Tony Mandarich, joining us right now. Tony, how are you doing, my man? This is just, it's unbelievable that we're on the phone with you. This is great. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing pretty good. Just sitting here in a lull period. It's late May, and we wanted to talk some football, so that's why we got a hold of you today. I hope that's okay with you because I can't stand a whole summer without talking football.
Absolutely. I mean, what did we do when we didn't have, I mean, some of these networks now are, 24/7, 12 months a year, they're football. I mean, 10 years ago it didn't exist.
I guess we tried to watch baseball during those times.
Right.
I don't know how that happened.
That didn't work out too well.
No, definitely not.
Well, Tony, we appreciate you being on with us, of course. You guys know him. First-round pick from the Green Bay Packers, 1989, the second overall pick in one of the most unbelievable, talented draft classes in the history of the NFL, of course, a Michigan State Spartan. Second highest draft pick position from a Michigan State Spartan, other than, of course, Bubba Smith. Take us back to your Michigan State days first, Tony, if you would, because, the hype grew with you as you got, deeper into your college career. But talk about how it was starting out at Michigan State and how you sort of began to develop your persona as this mean, nasty, heavy metal,
larger than life
comic book figure. How did it start out at Michigan State before you got to that?
I was always one of those guys that put goals on paper, and still am today. I put things on paper that I want to accomplish. That way, they're a tangible thing, and I look at them. And when I entered Michigan State, one of my goals was to become the best college football player in the country by the time I left Michigan State. So for me, it wasn't about becoming the best offensive lineman in the country. It was the best football player, period. And my goal was to win the Outland. It was to win. I think at that time it was just the Outland. They might have had another trophy that was for like a lineman or an interior lineman. I didn't set my standards on a Heisman because I don't think any lineman has won a Heisman. Maybe they have, but I wanted to be the number 1 player taken in the draft, and that was my goal when I entered Michigan State. Now, over 3 years of first year was a red shirt, and the 2 years I started, and then that fourth year there, it was my third year starting. At the end of that season, we ended up winning the Big Ten, going to the Rose Bowl, and winning the Rose Bowl. I think that's when the hype started, the persona started, and I'm an extremist, and if you can channel that extremeness, it can be a virtue for you. But if you can't channel it, it'll be a vice for you. And when I went out and played, I didn't want to just block people. I literally wanted to punish people. And it was just my style of play. And I didn't want to do things half speed. I wanted to do things full speed, and I wanted to finish full speed. And I wanted them to know that, that fueled with the media, and then, so 9 months later, you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and then, they do a big story, and they talk about Guns N' Roses, and, to this day, I have at least 3 times a week, somebody will email me, call me, walk up to me at a restaurant, at the gym, somewhere, and they'll just talk about that Sports Illustrated article, and they'll be like, they'll say something about it. They'll just be, and I don't know what it is. I mean, why that article was so popular. I've talked to the people at Sports Illustrated. I've talked to Rick Tellender, who did that story, because he did another story on me a couple years ago for Sports Illustrated, and he said that was the third most popular cover of the '80s that sold the most in the '80s. And I think it was kind of like a lot of it was timing, and I think a lot of people were just looking for something different, and they got it, and I think a lot of people latched onto it. And even at the gym last night, somebody had said, and this guy walks up to me, and this guy's 6'9", and he's like 320, and he's huge shoulders, and he's like, man, and he's not that much younger than me. He's like maybe 10 years younger than me. And he's like, man, he goes, I remember that Sports Illustrated article and the Guns N' Roses stuff. He goes, it motivated me so much to lift. And this guy's bigger than me. And I'm thinking to myself, you have no idea of the power of how you affect people's lives, whether it's in a good way or a negative way. And, most of the things that came out of that, I've had good or great feedback from, but obviously, as time went on, I did a lot of stupid things and hurt a lot of people, and then luckily turned it around, and now I'm, trying to help a lot of people.
Well, talking about that Sports Illustrated cover, talk about just what it was like for you. It had to be just an incredible time in your life. You're, on the cover it says best offensive line prospect ever. You're challenging Mike Tyson to a fight. You have all this hype. You've got the look. Just talk about what it was like in your life at that time. Was it just overwhelming? Did you take it all in stride? I mean, how did you handle all of that?
Well, it happened fast. It happened real fast, and as soon as that article hit, a week later, I'm on David Letterman. 3 weeks later, I'm on. There was a show called the Pat Sajak Show. The guy that hosted Wheel of Fortune, he had his own nightly talk show, and then on all these radio shows and national radio shows and this and that. And obviously, the internet wasn't around back then, so you didn't have that kind of coverage. But it was like a blitz of media, and I thought to myself, I'm going to try to use this to my advantage to, make as much money as I can in a negotiation leverage way, because, it's an old cliche, but it's a true cliche. You take one wrong shot on the field, and your knee's done, and you're done. You're done. You're done. You get that year of payment, and you're done. It's not like baseball. It's not like basketball where you have guaranteed money. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just try to, ride this thing, and really looking back, everything worked perfect, and I had the world in the palm of my hands, and the thing that didn't happen was I didn't perform, and the reason I didn't perform is because, I couldn't stop sticking a needle in my arm, I couldn't stop taking painkillers, and I couldn't stop drinking on a daily basis.
You said you wanted to be the number 1 overall pick in the 1989 draft. That was Troy Aikman to the Cowboys. What kind of talks were you in with the Cowboys? Did you try to sabotage Troy Aikman's workouts or anything? Can you just talk about that?
Well, at that time I lived in California, and they were working out Troy Aikman because he went to UCLA at the time. I think he had already transferred from Oklahoma originally, and so I got to meet him, and I had met him before at the Playboy All-America team and some of the Kodak All-America teams that they had flown us to, and so we got to know a lot of each other. But even though we had never played against each other, so Dallas was I think it was
Going back to the 1989 draft, looking back on it, can you just talk about looking back on it with Troy Aikman 1, you at 2, Barry Sanders 3, Derek Thomas 4, Deion Sanders 5, and just what that means?
Well, and probably, your probably two best athletes in that top 5 were Deion, and Deion was probably the best pure athlete, but Barry was just, the guy was just phenomenal. But so was Deion. I mean, when I look at that draft, and Troy Aikman was awesome. I mean, he was awesome, but he wasn't Joe Montana to me. But he was awesome, okay? Barry Sanders is one of the best running backs I've ever seen play. Deion Sanders is one of the best defensive backs, punt returners, kick returners, a guy that can change a game. There's one guy that can change the momentum of a game more so than anybody, and that's him, and which is an unbelievable talent to have. I mean, when he ran, it was like he was gliding. And then, obviously, I fell on my face in Green Bay, and made a comeback in Indy. Derek Thomas, again, extremely good. I think he still holds the record for most sacks in a single game.
Yep, 7.
And I remember that. I remember that game. I remember watching the highlights on ESPN, and then you have the unfortunate tragedy, and he passes away in a car wreck. But he was a great linebacker, but he wasn't Lawrence Taylor. But don't get me wrong. He's a Hall of Famer. He wasn't a Reggie White. Troy Aikman wasn't a Joe Montana or a Peyton Manning, but that doesn't mean that they're not quality enough to go in the Hall of Fame. These guys are unbelievable. The two that really impressed me in those top 5 were Barry and Deion. Those guys were just phenomenal athletes, and and I personally got to watch Barry play a lot of times because we were in the same division, and to watch him do some of the stuff he did, just made you go. It just defies what gravity and humans, what a human can do, and he did it, and he was so exciting to watch.
Now, of course, when your rookie season starts, how important was it to you to maintain, that persona that we had seen, coming from the Sports Illustrated article? Was the steroid use at that point still rampant, or was it something that when you got to the NFL, knowing that there's stricter guidelines, that you had sort of started to transition away from?
Well, all of my steroid use was at Michigan State. The 5 years, I had, the first time I ever took a steroid was my last month of high school. There was probably like 3 weeks left in high school. Obviously football season was done because we're graduating in like May. And I took some steroids, and then I took the steroids for 5 years at Michigan State. And when I got to the NFL, I knew just by doing my research that the way I could get away with cheating on a drug test in college, I would not be able to get away with in the NFL. So, my steroid use in college was probably one of the worst kept secrets, and but nobody could prove it because I always tested clean. And when somebody tells you when the test is, well, that's not good for it's not good for them, because you know what to take, how to take, and how to kind of get something that's going to give you a clean test. So I'm sure things have changed in the NCAA with random testing and things like that, but back then, and I say back then because it was 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, they tested you if you made a bowl game, and that was it. They never tested you, the next time you got tested was if you made a bowl game the next year. So, it wasn't that big a deal, to take steroids, and a lot of times I would take steroids, and if we were, 6-1 with 3 games left or 4 games left, looking like we were going to go to some kind of a bowl game, I would get off the steroids, and I would take water-based steroids because they get out of your system quicker. So it was, it was all that steroid use was in college, and then, like I said, once soon as I transitioned to the pros, what replaced the steroids for me was the painkillers and the alcohol, like almost immediately. And I think part of it was I was looking for something to fill the void, and there was some fear there because I was, I thought deep down inside, maybe I can't play at the level that I expect myself to play without the steroids.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about what type of anxiety or fear you felt going off the steroids now that you've made it to the NFL, and the pressure that you might have felt from Sports Illustrated cover and being the number 2 overall pick.
Well, I mean, definitely a lot of pressure. The way they wrote things, and I had never at that time claimed to be the best offensive lineman in the country. I didn't win the Outland. I finished second or third in the Outland. I finished fourth in the Heisman. But I found it interesting that the guy that did win the Outland got drafted 77th pick. So, it makes you kind of go, well, there's a little bit of politics here. But also the voting committee, makes you wonder if the voting committee is thinking, well, we're not going to vote for this guy because we think he's taking steroids. But they have no proof. So, at this point, it's like, who cares? I was the second player taken, but yeah, I was full of fear and full of doubt on whether I could play that game without the steroids. And the interesting thing was, and I talk about it in my book, everybody from the media to the coaches to the fans were so focused on the steroid use and the steroid accusations, and they were saying that's why he's failing, that's why he's not living up to his expectations because he took steroids in college and now he's not taking steroids. And that's probably 20% true, but 80% of it was right in front of their face, and nobody could recognize it because they were so blinded by the steroid accusations, and that was the abuse of painkillers and alcohol on a daily basis. And it was, to me at that time, I felt that was an advantage because it was deflecting the obvious that was in front of them. So, when I came clean, I said in the book, I said, hey, look, the steroids had nothing to do with the performance, because I've taken, I know enough about steroids and took them for 5 years, and that doesn't mean I know everything about them, but I would take them for 3 months, and then I would not take them for 3 months. Well, when I got off the steroids, I would lose about 10 to 15% strength. Well, if you're benching almost 600 pounds and you lose 10 to 15%, you're still pretty darn strong. And, okay, so I ran a 4.6, so I run a 4.7, or I run a 4.8. You're still pretty darn fast at 310. So, it's kind of like, it wasn't, if the people could see it, the steroids don't make you a great athlete. They do enhance your ability, but I can, tell you, steroid users were a dime a dozen that couldn't play football. Guys that were stronger than me, but they had no feet. Guys that had feet and were strong, but they couldn't think on their feet, and they couldn't react real quick. So there was so many dynamics and variables that go into all that stuff. And then obviously, the picture that Sports Illustrated painted, larger than life and playing into the persona, and then literally coming out with that claim of, the best offensive lineman ever to come out of college. I had never said that. They had said it. Now I rode that coattail, but, they kind of also were kind of like redeeming themselves 3 years later when they wrote the second article and put me on the cover and called it the Incredible Bust because, they were kind of, egg on their face because they had made a call and they were totally wrong. So, have to spend the hours. And it's not just spending the hours, it's the productivity in those hours. Because I know a lot of people that will work 13, 14, 15-hour days and I'll get as much done in 6 hours as they will in 15. So it's about also putting the time in but being productive during that time and using that time. So, there's a lot of those things that I still look at the same way today. Although I'm 18 years sober, I'm still wired the same way. And I've turned a lot of those vices into virtues. But you know what? I want to be the best photographer in the world. And okay, so what's the definition of the best photographer in the world? Well, you know what? There isn't one. It's be the best photographer that you can be, and follow your vision, follow your creative mind. Shoot and photograph the genre that you want to shoot, and just become the best that you can do with lighting and Photoshop, and working with a client and getting clients and giving them the experience that they want, or giving the campaign for a corporation what they want. Do that the best that you can do it, and you have to be willing to do things that other photographers are not willing to do. And for me, that is constantly learning on a daily basis. That's testing. When I test shoot, I set myself a project every week to do a test shoot, and I test light, and I test a subject, and I'll test Photoshop techniques, and I will get better every week. And there's a lot of photographers that aren't willing to do that, but there are a lot that still are willing to do that.
Absolutely, and as we fast forward to today, of course you have a book out, My Dirty Little Secret, Steroids, Alcohol, and God. Just kind of talk about your experience writing the book, and what our listeners could expect from reading it. Although the title is kind of a dead giveaway too, I guess. But talk about what that was like trying to put that project together.
Well, the book so the book came out in 2009, so 4 years ago. So I was like 15 years sober, and I was planning on putting the book out as soon as I retired from Indianapolis, which would have been 99 or 2000, because you're still a fresh name, and you just retired and you made the comeback. And for me, the comeback was crucial because I had 3 years and I started 2.5 years, and I was sober. And I proved to myself that I could play football without steroids, I could play without painkillers, I could play without those drugs. And so that was a crucial thing for me in writing the book, and basically carrying that message that, the way I did it originally was the wrong way. There is a right way to do it, and there is a better way to do it. The motivation for me for writing the book was two huge things. One was to explain to everybody what had happened behind the scenes, and it's what we talked about earlier. Everybody was so focused on the steroids, they were missing the obvious of the painkiller abuse and 10 different doctors in 3 different states and getting prescriptions filled, and just it was a job. It was a job to maintain that lifestyle. And the second part of the book was, or the second motive for writing the book was to really help, anybody with adversity, period. So it doesn't have to be drinking adversity. It doesn't have to be someone who has a chemical abuse problem. It could be about any kind of adversity, and everybody has adversity. I mean, if you haven't had adversity, you're living in a cave. Or you're going to be guaranteed to get adversity, and there's all different levels of adversity. Some are speed bumps, and some are, grand slams that will knock you down. And all I do is I share my experience on what I did. And there was a point where, I looked myself in the mirror and I said, you know what, you're either going to tuck your tail and you're going to crawl into a cave and die, or you're going to grab the bull by the horns and you're going to do something about this. And the way I'm wired was to grab that bull by the horns and do something about it and make things right. hard and they're happy, there's nothing wrong with that. If they're satisfied with that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But that's not me. I want to excel in whatever I do. And, obviously the football days are long done. But, I still have passion for some things now. I would say probably my two biggest passions now are photography and really carrying the message to people that think there is no light at the end of the tunnel, and letting them know, look, if this guy could do it, and as down and low as I was in the gutter, and not just in the gutter, but on the front pages in the gutter of publications of, people kicking me, and when I was down and calling me a bust and doing all this and all that, and then to say, you know what, I don't need to listen to that, and I don't need to believe that, because I know what the truth is. And, to pick yourself up and then to do it, I know that it gives people hope. And, I'll tell them, I'll say, look, if this dumb football player could do it, anybody could do it. And there's been a lot of people that have gotten sober, and and that doesn't mean that I got them sober. What it means is all I did was share my experience with them, and they had to walk the walk. They had to do the hard part. All I kind of did was point them in the direction and tell them, look, if this is the kind of life you want, this is what you need to do. Otherwise, you're just going to be spinning your wheels in the same spot like I was for, almost a decade.
Yeah, that's a really good message. I wanted to get your thoughts on playing with Peyton Manning, Marshall Faulk, and when Peyton Manning was at the Pro Bowl calling Mike Vanderjagt the idiot kicker who got liquored up and ran his mouth.
Well, I'm an opinionated guy, right?
Definitely. That's why we have you on. We love it.
Marshall Faulk is, if I don't know if you guys have ever met Marshall Faulk, but when I met Marshall Faulk, my reaction was probably what most people's reaction is, and that's Marshall Faulk, because he has that athletic body, but he was such a great player on the field that you would expect him to look like Adrian Peterson, right? You'd expect him to just be huge shoulders and stuff, and he was just he was a cool cat. He was just he could blend into a crowd nicely, but boy, I tell you what, he puts that helmet on, look out. And I've seen him run some people over that totally shocked me. Unbelievable talent, great speed, great knowledge of the game, and a very, very intelligent guy. And obviously, he's on TV now as an announcer, and he does very well, and he's a great guy, and he was always nice to me when I was in Indy, and I played with him for 2 years. So Peyton Manning, from day one when he walked into that locker room, he was a pro. He acted like a pro. He walked like a pro. He took command of that huddle as a rookie. The guy was as competitive a human being as I've ever seen in my life. As thorough, as prepared. He is like the ultimate of quarterbacks or of football players. And I feel, I played with Peyton for 2 years, and I can't tell you how privileged I feel that I was there to be able to play with him and block for him, knowing now, like when you look at his career, and it's on the latter side of his career, he's probably got 3-4 years left. The stuff he's accomplished and the stuff that he still will accomplish, and looking at the history books and all that, the guy is just unbelievable what he did. And I'll just throw another name in of Jim Harbaugh. I got to play with Jim Harbaugh for my first year in Indy, and again, I always, joke around with people that have went to U of M, University of Michigan, because they were such a big rival for us. But Jim's one of the classiest guys that I've ever met. Again, as competitive as anybody, as intense as anybody. intense. He was, very disciplined, very prepared, and you expect that out of players in the NFL when you reach that level. As far as Mike Vanderjagt goes, the stuff I want to say about Mike Vanderjagt I can't say on the air. So I'm probably better off just not saying anything.
Well, we had our censors ready to go just in case, but
now we're paying them for nothing.
Well, there's an old saying: "What comes around goes around."
Absolutely. Well, yeah, Tony, as we kind of wrap things up here with you, I just want to tell you kind of on a personal level, like it's wonderful to hear your story and talk to you because you hear the term associated with you, quote unquote draft bust. You hear that associated with you quite a bit, and to me, the fact that you were able to get your life back together, you're able to re-enter the NFL in 1998. To me, that just because a player may not live up to expectation, I don't know that labels them a bust anymore because there's so many factors, injuries, personal problems. I mean,
sure.
Do you kind of embrace that term when you see that, the NFL Network's top 10 draft bust, you're on there? I mean, do you kind of embrace that term, or is it something, that you kind of, shy away from?
Well, listen, let's call a spade a spade. The Green Bay years were a bust. And I don't care what the reason was for. I mean, they were a bust because I was a drug addict and an alcoholic, but that doesn't matter. The bottom line is they were still a bust.
Sure.
And I think the big thing that a lot of people, whether you want to call them naysayers or haters or whatever you want to call them, a lot of people choose not to look at the Indianapolis years and not to choose to look at, the fact that I, came back and played. And I was out of the league for 3 years. And I can tell you, it's not easy to be out of the league for 3 years and then come back in. And especially after you were a loudmouth, arrogant SOB and burned a lot of bridges. And, really, nobody really had to give me a chance. And I was fortunate enough that Indianapolis gave me a chance, and that's all I needed. I said to myself, if I get a chance, I'm gonna make it right this time. And so I felt very fortunate that way, and I feel very lucky that I got to play there. I got to slay those personal demons, and play, prove to myself that I can play sober, I can play competitive. And granted, I never made the Pro Bowl, but I was a starter for 2.5 years in the NFL. So I was like, you know what? I've lived my dream, and when it was over, the transition for me, because I had such a solid foundation underneath me with the people I had surrounded myself with, and those weren't just with people that were sober, but they were just with the right people. They weren't, the remoras, which is, the little fish that hangs around the big sharks to eat the barnacles off them. I mean, there's remoras around everybody with money. You look at some of these players and they have a posse of 20 remoras, what I call remoras. They're just people that are part of their posse. They want to hang out. Everything's paid for. But when the money's gone, they're gone. And when I left Indy, I had surrounded myself with a very strong foundation of people, so the transition into the real world was extremely smooth for me, where the transition when I left Green Bay into the real world was a disaster.
Well, Tony, I think your message speaks more to positivity, in 2013, and I would advise anyone to read your book, check out interviews that you do, because I think that they can take a lot of positive things from it. And we really appreciate you. We've kept you way too long today, but we really wanted to reach out to you and get you on the line and talk to you. And I'm so glad you were able to give this opportunity. Now, on a lighter note, before I let you go, I do have one final question, and I'm dead serious about this. Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose solo, whatever you want to call it, is playing Kansas City this weekend. Do we attend this concert, Tony? Do we do it, or do we let the past be the past?
Well, I'll tell you. I tell you from personal experience. I've seen them 4 times. I saw them. The Use Your Illusion tour was in 1992, and they opened up in Milwaukee. And obviously, they were off the charts. They were so good. Now, a year and a half ago, December 27th of 11, they played here in Phoenix, and Axel and Dizzy Reed were the only, and actually Dizzy Reed wasn't even an original member because there was 5 of them, and he was a keyboardist that was added on the second album. But Axel was the only original member.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, I'm going, and not only am I going, but my wife's going to go, and my kids are going to go. And my 14-year-old daughter went, my 20-year-old daughter went, and my wife went, and I'll tell you what, Axel rocked the shit out of that place.
I love it.
It was absolutely awesome. I mean, I'm not going to say they were better. I'm not going to say he was better than he was 20 years ago, because he's not. He can't carry that scream as long. But the show he puts on, and he still runs around like a madman on that stage, and he's still got that screechy, screamy voice. And listen, it made my blood rush. I mean, I was like, and I told my kids, I said, listen, when your dad was in his prime, this was the band that I'm sure people that I've talked to have said, hey, look, Led Zeppelin when they were in their prime, and all these other people that were older bands, or the Beatles. To me, Guns N' Roses and that one album, Appetite for Destruction. I mean, I could put Appetite personally. Now I'm biased, of course.
Sure.
I'll put Appetite for Destruction up against any album that ever came out. And, I would, Back in Black by AC/DC was one of the ultimate albums that come out. But as far as one solid album where everything was just raw and in your face, and again, it might be, I'm probably biased because it was the right time for me in the right place. But I'll tell you what, I would highly recommend you go. It is absolutely awesome. They have 3 guitarists that are just phenomenal. And listen, they're not Slash, but Slash comes with a persona too, right? And Slash has a talent of his own style, and the guy's a phenom. But I'll tell you what, these 3 guys are phenomenal.
Yeah, and actually, I did see the show on the last tour last winter. They rolled through Kansas City, and I did see them at the Sprint Center, and I definitely wanted to bring it up for conversation purposes because they are coming back to a smaller venue here in Kansas City. So definitely going to go check them out. I'm a huge fan of the band as well. Definitely put Appetite up with even Van Halen 1, some of the greatest debuts. And so that's great times. I'm glad we're able to talk some music with you as well. So maybe next time they roll through Phoenix, we'll roll down and we can check it out with you and meet up. That'd be a great experience for us. But
and you guys, with the connections you have, we should be able to get backstage passes.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know. My bedtime might be a little sooner, than Axel wants to stay up and talk to us. I don't.
You know what? I mean, seriously, do we have to start the show at 11 o'clock?
I mean, come on. We're old. We can't. None of us can stay up that late anymore. Maybe when we were, in college, right?
I seriously was. I wanted to just be like, Axel, seriously, do we have to start at 11 o'clock? I mean, come on.
I guess whatever gets him on stage, because if that's what it takes, I guess it's worth it. But
yeah, I mean, and it's a, I don't know if I'll ever see them again. If they come to town, I definitely will go again. But I was kind of like, I mean, can't you start at 9:30 and be done by 12:30? But you got to start at 11 and you're not done till 2:30 in the morning. I mean, that wrecks my workout the next day.
Well, we're on luckily it's this weekend and it's not on a work night, so I'm casting the schedule aside, and I think that I'm going to be able to make it happen. So it's
right.
Tony, I tell you what, this has been an absolute pleasure, and we will certainly be in touch with you, via social media and such over the summer. And we hope to have you on again, maybe before the season when there's actually some football to start talking about. We'd love to have you back on because we just love your story. We think you're a wonderful, influential figure, and we just thank you so much for being on today, Tony. We appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it, and it was a privilege, and you've got my contact info. You call me anytime.
Oh, we appreciate it. We definitely will, Tony, and we hope you have a great summer. We'll definitely be in touch with you.
All right, guys. Have a good day.
All right. Take care, Tony.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Big thanks to Tony Mandarich for being on with us for such a long period of time and sharing his story with us. Can't think of enough. Just really good stuff.
Yeah, people have the misconception that he stopped steroids in the NFL, and that's what caused his downfall, his busting out of the Green Bay Packers. But actually, it was trying to replace the steroids with his addiction of and abusing pain pills and alcoholism. That's what caused him to bust out. He went to rehab, came back a few years later to the Indianapolis Colts, and kind of got back on his feet until he got a shoulder injury that knocked him out.
Well, and I'm just very thankful we were able to have him on. He a very personable guy. Somebody that you don't know a lot about unless you hear him in an interview like this, because he has a lot of labels. He was, all the hype with the Sports Illustrated and the huge body and the steroids. Like, a lot gets associated with him. But when I walk away with it, I am more just, I think of it as a positive thing. He's a positive figure to me now, whereas maybe before he wasn't. In my mind, he's now a positive figure, and that's how it's going to be, because he has a good story, and he was able to rebound.
Exactly. He went through tough times. He went to rehab. He got back, and now he's into photography, and he's trying to be the best photographer he can, and just bouncing back and really striving in life.